Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president, and this is an on-the-road commentary, as you can see, about the Colorado Libertarian Party presidential debate that took place just this last Saturday. The most fascinating debate so far. Absolutely, without a doubt. And if you stick with me, because this could be a long one, you're going to see why I say that this one's the most fascinating so far. All right, first of all, everybody was really nice again. I mean, I had people coming up and saying, Jacob, thank you for coming and sharing your views. I mean, as a candidate, you really love to hear that because you get a sense that people understand the process, that in order to nominate the best person to represent the Libertarian Party and the message of the Libertarian Party and the principles of the party, you got to hear what the candidates have to say. And so they were like grateful, and of course I'm grateful, and my opponents are grateful that they put together this event and that they have a dinner for us there, and along with everyone else. So the gratitude goes in both directions, but it's an important part of the process to have these venues where people can share their perspectives, whether it's a debate format or a talk or what have you. All right, so the debate starts out with a general question where everybody has 2 minutes to answer is, what do you consider your most important issue? And so I said, the most important issue in this debate is, what message do you want your candidate, your presidential candidate, to carry to the American people on your behalf? And so it can be the standard message that has come to define our party and our presidential campaigns for the last 20 years. Or we can go in the direction that I'm advocating, the direction of pure libertarian principles. Now, obviously, the trend in this party, I'm not naive, is to, let's just do it again, Jacob. We've been doing this for 20 years, and therefore we ought to continue doing it again. And as I explained in this opening statement, I said, where has this standard message got us? 3 years ago, we got 1% of the vote. Okay? And now we're down to 0. I mean, there's actually a 0 in the latest presidential poll for Libertarian Party. And so if things have gotten worse in terms of voter sentiment toward the LP presidential candidate, that should be a wake-up call for us. We essentially already know the results of the 2024 election as far as the LP is concerned, because if the sentiment has not gotten better in 3 years, but it's actually gotten worse from 1% to 0%, it's a virtual certainty things are not going to change over the next 6 or 7 months. So we already know the results unless we change directions, and this is what the argument I've been making. Now, what do I mean by the standard message? Well, it's the message that has come to define the party. Social Security reform, Social Security privatization, opt-out plans, but continue Social Security, the crown jewel of American socialism, for at least one generation. And you can go back to the South Carolina Libertarian Party debates a few months ago, and my opponents in this race, except for Josh Smith was on the same page as me in that debate, were just vociferous of how we need to continue this program, the socialist program, for the next generation, which is 25 years minimum. People might live longer than 25, that's likely. But in other words, it's a plan to achieve freedom in 25 years from now, which doesn't interest me, not at my age. And then, indefinite continuation of Medicare, Medicaid, the other crown jewels of American socialism, just reform them with health savings accounts, something called direct medical care, school vouchers, popular message that has come to define our party for 20 years now. Now taking over the public school system, getting libertarians to run for school board so we can show Americans that libertarians can run this socialist institution, which it is, better than Democrats and Republicans. Immigration controls, that's become part of the standard message. We've been running that for 20 years. Vesting government with the power to control the movements of people, the peaceful movements of people across borders, and everybody's got a plan, of course. And let me see what else. Regulatory reform, drug war reform. So it's FDA reform of the welfare state, warfare state way of life. That's the standard message. My message is completely opposite. It's based on restoring the founding principles of this party of freedom, free markets, and voluntary charity. Dismantle socialism immediately, without hesitation. Socialism has been the bane of mankind. Repeal Social Security, Medicare without any hesitation, and rejects school vouchers. School vouchers are just a socialist reform measure imported from the Republican Party. Uses the coercive apparatus of taxation to take money from one group of people to fund the educational decisions of another group of people. Immigration controls. I'm a firm believer in open borders, which is the principled libertarian position, has been for more than 50 years. And so what I'm saying is, let's do something different here. Let's run a campaign of principle. We call ourselves the Party of Principle. And certainly that's on the LP website, Party of Principle TM. I think they mean trademark. I'm not positive, but if they do, what they're saying is we don't want anybody else to co-opt this name. We want it just for our purposes. Well, my position is, if you're going to label yourself that, then it's incumbent on you to live up to it. And when you're advocating socialism, that's not really a party of principle, in my opinion. But this message is the standard message is deeply ingrained in this party. Let me show you how deeply ingrained it is, because I'm not naive. I know I'm going up against a big tide here, like those salmon that swim upstream in the Northwest, and it's much more difficult to try to shift the direction of the party than it is to run a standard Libertarian Party presidential campaign. And that's what I'm trying to do, is shift the entire party away from the standard message and toward its founding principles of freedom, free markets, and voluntary charity. 3 years ago, as y'all may know, I sought the party's nomination. And I didn't, this is just to put things into context, I didn't qualify for the South Carolina debate 3 years ago because I had not announced early enough. They had a deadline for announcing before the convention. But I went and attended the debate. And the first question, or at least one of the first 2 or 3 questions, was by Matt Welch of Reason Magazine. And he says, "What is your position on Medicare?" And all the people on the stage, the presidential candidates, gave their answer, which was the standard answer: reform Medicare, get health savings accounts, whatever. They all had a reform plan. So I came back to my home and I put on my campaign website that I had attended the debate, and I said, I want everybody to know what I would have said on that particular question. I mean, to me, that was just a normal thing to do. If I had been in this debate, this is how I would have answered. And I explained why. This was a socialist program. It's contrary to the principles of freedom. It destroyed the finest healthcare system in history. It's the root cause of why prices have soared and why we have a healthcare crisis. So my position is repeal it so you can restore health to the healthcare industry. Well, immediately Reason Magazine goes on the attack. That Jacob's just trying to show that he's more libertarian or more principled than all the other candidates. In other words, like pompous, arrogant. I mean, they didn't use those words, but that was the thrust of it. That's how I interpreted it. Jacob's just trying to show he's more libertarian than the other candidate, which is ridiculous. I never said that. All I simply said was, this is how I would answer the question, because I wanted everybody to know how I would answer the question. And anyway, how would you even measure who's more principled or more libertarian than another candidate? It's impossible to measure such a thing. But this has been the standard response of the reform-oriented wing of the Libertarian Party. That is, those that have settled in and have defined libertarianism as simply a reform of the welfare state way of life, and in certain instances a reform of the warfare state way of life. That's now been redefined as libertarian, even though Medicare clearly violates the libertarian non-aggression principle, because it's based on taxation, the initiation of force, which violates our core principle, the non-aggression principle, and the pledge that we all take in the party not to support the initiation of force. So then I get a phone call from one of my big supporters, I mean, a big supporter. And he is going ballistic, telling me, you need to take that article down right now. You can't win this nomination by taking that position. I said, what are you talking about? He says, it is so deeply ingrained in this party will never nominate somebody that is an opposition that wants to call for the repeal of Social Security and Medicare. You're never going to get anywhere with this. I said, hey man, this is a classic socialist program. Maybe we ought to move the party over to the freedom position. No, you're never going to do that. Your campaign is sunk if you don't take that off your website. And we later learned in one of the campaigns, the insider told us, we always knew Jacob would self-destruct by calling for the repeal of Social Security because it's so deeply ingrained in the party and the party membership. And which, you know, to me was just, I mean, like, are you kidding me? I mean, these are the crown jewels of American socialism, but it showed me that, you know, what has happened to the party in terms of abandonment of principles and moving over into this Republican area of reform, you know, privatization, the opt-out plans, continuing Social Security for 25 years minimum, health savings accounts, school vouchers, which came in from the Republican Party. In fact, school vouchers are one of the fascinating things about this debate, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But so is Social Security. This is another fascinating part, and I'll talk to you about that too, about this Colorado debate. So my position is that the Libertarian Party is here to lead America to freedom. That is our position. And you're never going to lead America to freedom by advocating socialism. Socialism is the bane of mankind. It's the worst philosophy ever. And yet here we have presidential candidates advocating socialism with these various programs, including immigration. I mean, the immigration controls are based on this socialist principle of central planning. That's why we've had 80 years of crisis. Ludwig von Mises said that central planning will always lead to planned chaos. Well, that's what we have, planned chaos for 80 years. But everybody's got this concept that he can make socialism work, that he's going to be the one that come up with the plan, and it's ridiculous. Nobody's going to come up with a plan to make socialism work. It's an inherently defective paradigm. It comes with death and suffering and kidnappings and rapes, like on the border, and a police state, a massive police state. So I'm saying this is the direction I want to take the party, and that it will achieve a major breakout votes. You see, we've got this mindset that is just settled in, that we have to resign ourselves to 0, 1%, maybe 2%, and that there's nothing we can do about it. If only we had more money. That was it. That's one of the big arguments. If only we had big money, Jacob, we could really break out. And my question is, what are you going to do with the money? And they say, well, we get our message out, Jacob. We go out and buy advertising with big money. Or if we could get into the debates, Jacob. And I say, well, okay, what's the debate? What do you hope to accomplish with getting into the debate? We get our message out, Jacob. Okay, but if people don't like your message, what difference does it make? You see, there's this assumption that if people would just hear the standard message of libertarian socialism and libertarian reform, that they would vote for it. That they're just eager to vote for it if they can only, no. But the fact is, the reality is, everybody knows what we stand for in this party. I mean, we've had the same message for 20 years. How can you assume that voters don't know what we stand for when we've been saying the same thing for 20 years? In fact, the press even refers to the Libertarian Party as a right-wing political party. And there's no question that we are right-wing. I mean, when you school vouchers, immigration controls, Social Security privatization, income tax reform, sales tax. I mean, this is classic Republican measures. So everybody already knows our message. Let me give you the perfect example of this, and that's Chase Oliver's race for Senate in Georgia. Chase ran, in my opinion, a perfect Libertarian Party campaign for Senate. Perfect. I mean, he ended up getting $20, $30, $40 million of free advertising because he was the determining factor as to whether there was going to be a runoff. So he gets this massive publicity nationwide. It was incredible. I don't think anybody in the Libertarian Party will ever match it. No, certainly nobody ever has, including presidential candidates. I mean, he had massive Bloomberg, ABC, CBS, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Washington Post, New York Times, The Wire services, Chase Oliver, Libertarian Party, Chase Oliver, Libertarian Party, massive publicity. He got into a statewide debate with an incumbent U.S. senator, one-on-one debate, where he had half the time. So if there's any libertarian candidate that got his message out to every single voter in that state, it's Chase Oliver. And he delivered his message in an absolutely eloquent fashion. If y'all seen Chase, you know, he gets very passionate and very excited, and he made his case there in that debate with Warnock in that same fashion, that they ought to read the bills. Congress isn't reading the bills, and by golly, if I go to Congress, I'm going to read the bills. And he favored, you know, healthcare reform, and he said the immigration system's broken, that he was going to fix it. He was going to go to Washington and fix the broken system. And he's a big advocate of school vouchers, what he calls school choice, regulatory reform, small government, smaller Pentagon. He favors a 50% reduction in the Pentagon, a smaller CIA, a smaller DEA, a smaller ATF. I mean, there is nobody better, I think, or few people, I should say, few people better in this party at making the case for this standard message than Chase Oliver. So he gets his message out to every single voter. It didn't matter that he got outspent, because he had all this publicity that got his message to every voter. Everybody knew what Chase stood for, and he ended up with 2%. Okay, and no doubling of the party membership. You didn't have this huge influx of party members. It was just 2%. So what difference does it make with that message? That's my position, is that there is no excitement out there. There's no constituency for this message. Now, is it a popular message in the Republican Party? Absolutely. That's where it came from. Okay, and it's popular among Republicans. Republicans that run with this platform do very well. But there's no constituency out there for a libertarian candidate that carries this same message. You know who gets this is Justin Amash. Amash is a smart guy. He's done a lot of soul searching here. That he's got the standard message, okay? Reform Social Security, reform healthcare, reform immigration controls, reform. And his message is no different from all of my opponents in this race. It's just standard message. And he comes into the Libertarian Party with this message. The first Libertarian member of Congress, but he's not elected. Okay, that's a crucial distinction here. He doesn't run for re-election, which he could have as a Libertarian to Congress, but he didn't. So he comes in. He's very influential, very prominent in the party. I would rank him in the top 3. He's given a featured spot at the Libertarian Party National Convention in Reno 2 years ago. Now he's going to run for U.S. Senate. But guess what he's doing? He's going back through the revolving door that has been established between the Republican Party and the Libertarian Party over the last 20 years, and he's running as a Republican. Why? I mean, he's got a fierce, ferocious primary he's got to go through. 8 or 9 opponents. They're going to attack him viciously for voting to impeach Trump. Trump's going to come after him. They're going to call him a traitor for going over the Libertarian Party. He's in for a real fight. Why is he doing this? He could have the Libertarian Party nomination for Senate on a silver platter there in Michigan, because he's figured it out. He's figured out that this standard message that has come to define our party and our presidential campaigns, including the ones that exist today, cannot garner votes out there. It's popular inside the Libertarian Party, but that's not a lot of votes inside the Libertarian Party. Not in the general election. In the general election, he's figured out that that message, the standard message, cannot garner votes. That's why Chase only got 2% when everybody knew what his message was. Mike Termott, another example. Mike Termott ran for Congress just a year and a half ago, like Chase did, with a professional campaign, same message that he's using today, the standard message. And man, he had volunteers. He got into the debates. Got his message out to every single voter there in the 20th Congressional District. And at the end, less than 1%. Because there's no constituency out there for that message. This is why we're at 0% now. Because there's not a great big mass of people over there saying, God, we can't wait to vote for this standard message of the Libertarian Party presidential candidates. Now, what about my message? Well, okay, that I'm there saying that we don't have to settle for 0 to 1%. We don't have to settle for that. That's become deeply ingrained in this party that, oh, Jacob, that's all we can do. And it is all you can do. That's your max with the standard message. I'm saying that if you run a campaign based on pure libertarian principles, no exceptions, you can get into the 10 to 15% category. And that brings up the second part, another part of this debate in Colorado. So they asked a bunch of questions. Where do you stand on this and that? And everybody took their turn. But then they get to the 5-minute block. Now, 5 minutes is like eternity in these debates. And they address a different question to each person. And you got 5 minutes to answer. And so the question is the moderator hits me with, Jacob, you're a proponent of open borders. Do you really think that's the best libertarian solution? And gosh, this is like an opportunity to explain that this is one of the greatest opportunities in the history of this party, maybe in our lives. And one thing I've learned about life is that when life presents you with opportunities and you let them pass you by, they may never present themselves again. And the worst thing would be to get on your deathbed at some point in your life and think back to this election right here and say, damn it, that guy Jacob Hornberger was right. We had one hell of an opportunity to do some open field running in this campaign for the Libertarian Party, and we let it go by. Because you see, what I explained to them about this issue of immigration is that this is the only solution to the immigration morass. There is no other solution. You know, this thing's been going on for 80 years. It's easy to think, oh, the crisis just started, Jacob, in the last 4 or 5 years under Biden, you know. No, it's gone on all my life. I grew up on the border. We had Border Patrol coming onto our farm, which was located on the Rio Grande, busting our workers. I mean, this is how far this thing goes back. People were lamenting the immigration crisis back there. They've lamented them continuously for 80 years. Okay? Because this is a socialist system. It's based on the socialist principle of central planning. That means, as Ludwig von Mises said, central planning always brings planned chaos. That's what we've had on the border for 80 years. Along with a police state, because with this system, you have to prevent people from violating the rule. The rule is you can't come in without permission, or what my opponents call an invitation. Well, then you need a police state to enforce it, because people are going to say, well, the heck with that system, I'm going to circumvent. So that's where you need the massive Border Patrol and the highway checkpoints and the roving Border Patrol checkpoints and the Berlin Wall and the concertina wire, because people are always going to try to avoid these things. So we've had 80 years of this thing, and one of the amusing parts of this, everybody's got a plan, including my opponents. Everybody's got a plan to, make this system work. And for example, when Chase was in his debate with Warnock, asked about immigration, and Chase said, the system's broken, but I'll go to Washington and I'll make the duopoly work and I'll make this immigration system work. It's ridiculous. It's not broken. And I told that to this convention. It is not broken. The system is not broken. Broken means you can conceivably fix it. This is an inherently defective system. Socialism is inherently defective. Nobody can make it work. No plan will ever make it work. But here's the important thing. This is an opportunity, the likes of which may never present itself, to do some real open field running in this presidential campaign. This is the burning domestic issue of our time. If we run the standard message, all we're doing is copying the Republicans, okay, and the Democrats, and they both favor this immigration control system. Now they have different means of enforcing it. Democrats might oppose the concertina wire, and Republicans love the concertina wire to cut people up that are swimming across the Rio Grande. But regardless, they both believe in this concept that government needs to control people that are crossing borders, which is the concept that all of my opponents agree with. If we run a campaign that copies them, that takes their same position and just varies it on terms of enforcement, we're going to get nowhere. I mean, we're at 0% in the polls. If this was a big winner position, then why are we at 0%? Why did we only get 1% 3 years ago? And I'll tell you why. Because every single right-wing proponent, and that's who we target, the right wing. We don't target the left wing, especially like with school vouchers. That's a right-wing proposal, and the standard message is support school vouchers the tendency has always been to target the Republican Party for votes. I mean, you hear that, the party of Ron Paul, the party of Ron Paul. What they're saying with that is they're targeting the Republicans that supported Ron Paul. And so if we copy the Republicans on immigration controls, how many votes will that produce for the LP presidential candidate with the standard message? Zero. This is what all too many members of our party that lean in this direction now, of the socialist system of immigration controls, have not figured out. They keep thinking, oh, it's so popular. Immigration controls are so popular. Well, they're all going to vote for Trump. Every single right-wing proponent of immigration controls is going to vote for Trump. He's the real enchilada when it comes to immigration. I mean, why would they waste their vote on an LP candidate? It would be a wasted vote. I mean, you often hear in this debates, what are you going to do about the wasted vote syndrome? My position is voters are very logical. They don't want to waste their vote. They would be wasting their vote on an LP presidential candidate whose position is the same as Donald Trump on immigration. Now, look at that. Let's look at it from the other side. There are millions of migrant families across America that are horrified by what's been going on the border for 80 years. They've seen the concertina wire. They've seen the deaths in the backs of 18-wheelers, dying of thirst in the Rio Grande, or on the desert in the American Southwest, dying of drowning in the Rio Grande. They've seen the kidnappings, the rapes, the separation of children from parents, the refugee centers, the lack of dignity accorded to these people. All they're looking for is leadership and a viable alternative. And we have that viable alternative, and that's open borders. It is the only alternative, viable or not. It is the only solution. Now, what we've been passing out at these conventions, just in the last two conventions, is a new flyer that shows 4 books calling for open borders, prominent books, to show LP members this is not just some esoteric pie in the sky thing. It's a real solution. You've got my book that I co-edited called The Case for Free Trade and Open Immigration with Richard Ebeling. Some of you know Richard. He's the former Ludwig von Mises Professor of Economics at Hillsdale College, former president of the Foundation for Economic Education, also known as FEE, and now he teaches economics at the Citadel. He and I co-edited this book. We've been on the same page ever since we met in the 80s, and then we co-edited this book some 30 years ago. There's a brand new book called The Case for Open Borders by John Washington, journalist out of Tucson. One of the best books on immigration you'll ever read. It addresses every single objection to open borders. It makes an absolutely eloquent case for open borders. Brian Kaplan, brilliant professor at George Mason University, friend of mine. He and I were defendants in the mock trial at Freedom Fest last summer for supporting open borders, and we got acquitted by the jury. And he's written a book called Open Borders. Beautiful book, graphic book, it's by illustrations and so forth. And then the 4th book is by Jason Riley, a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board. His book is entitled Let Them In, The Case for Open Borders. So we're letting people know that this is our opportunity. Okay? Count up all these millions of families that are looking for leadership, that are looking for a viable alternative, and we run a presidential campaign, i.e. me, that makes the religious case, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, the moral case, that people have rights to pursue happiness and cross borders, to improve their lives, better their lives, the economic case, free markets, prosperity. Those are my voters. Those are my voters, and this is why I say that this opportunity exists right now to vault us into 10 to 15% on this issue alone. Okay. Now, as I pointed out in this 5-minute block, I said 20 years ago I ran for U.S. Senate in Virginia with the same set of principles. My opponents in the party were laughing. They were mocking. They thought I'd get 0.01%, 0.02%. I'm calling for the immediate repeal of Social Security, Medicare. I was running against one of the most popular governors in the history of the state, John Warner, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. This is right after the 9/11 attacks. I knew I wouldn't get one Republican vote, and I don't care. I don't target Republicans for votes. For me, Republicans are no different from Democrats in principle. And then I knew I wouldn't get one Democrat vote. They were not running a candidate. They weren't going to vote for me, calling for the repeal of Social Security, Medicare, and public schooling and open borders. But I ended up with 7% of the statewide vote. This is 20 years ago. And one of the biggest honors in my entire life was I got the endorsement of a pastor, the Alfred Street Baptist Church in Alexandria, Virginia. John O. Peterson, he got elected to the African American Hall of Fame, and I went in there. He didn't know me from Adam. I didn't have any money to run this campaign. I was relying on the power of this message, the libertarian message, and I said, Pastor Peterson, these are my principles. Open the borders. What we're doing down there, this is 20 years ago, to immigrants. It just violates every principle of Christianity, especially the second greatest commandment, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I want to get all the welfare state repealed. It's been a disaster, including for blacks. I want to repeal the drug war, the most racist government programs in segregation. I want to bring all the troops home, dismantle this whole overseas military machine that has brought death to so many people around the world. As Martin Luther King called it, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. At the end of this conversation, he knew I couldn't win, but he said, Mr. Hornberger, I'm going to endorse your candidacy, and I want you to take this letter of endorsement to every black minister in the state. And I did. And I got 7% of the statewide vote. I have no doubts that this message, when you talk about the migrant families, especially the Hispanic families across America, and blacks that have suffered oppression with this drug war, that's what can double what I did. That's what can vault us into the 10 to 15% category. And fighting as libertarians, okay? Fighting as libertarians with our principles, which I've long held are our greatest asset. All right, so that was my message. Okay, then they turned to Michael Rechtenwald, and I'm sure he wasn't expecting it, because they said, you've been a fierce proponent of immigration controls. Do you still adhere to this position? Now, what was really funny about this is that for the last several debates, Rechtenwald gives a gobbledygook answer whenever he's asked about immigration. And it's something like, oh, well, in a private property order in an anarchist society, and based on Hans Hermann Hoppe's immigration formulation theory, and that we're going to have an invitation-only system, and it's going to work out beautifully, and it's all gobbledygook. I mean, where he really stands, and this is what the moderator was pointing out, and I point out too in debates, where he stands was reflected in an article he wrote just, I don't know, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, for Chronicles magazine, a right-wing rag magazine, where he said he favors sealing the border. Now, sealing the border means sealing the border. That means the military. That's the only way you're going to seal the border, like in North Korea. North Korea has a sealed border. That's the military. What's really funny about this is he calls himself an anarchist, but he wants to be president. He wants to abolish Congress and the Supreme Court so they can't interfere with him. And then he's going to have this massive police state down there where he's going to seal the border that's enforced by the military. And he also wants to continue Trump's Berlin Wall. That's in the Chronicles magazine article. You can Google it. Just Michael Rechtenwald Chronicles magazine. I think it's called "What Next for the Right" or something like that. And so he wants to complete the wall. He doesn't say this now. He always uses gobbledygook now. But I remind him when I have the opportunity that this is his real position. And you know what finishing the wall means? More eminent domain stealing of people's property. I mean, to build that wall, they had to steal property that has been in families for generations. And this is what he favors, the continuation of this wall, which is based on stealing. And then he wants to evict every single illegal immigrant. And that's in the Chronicles magazine article too. I mean, you want to know what kind of reign of terror that would entail? I mean, he's going to be using ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, the Border Patrol, FBI. I mean, how else are you going to ferret out? He's going to be calling on people to snitch on their neighbors. How else are you going to get rid of every single illegal immigrant in the country? And we're talking about 11 million people that he wants to evict. But what was funny is that, you see, he's got 5 minutes he's got to fill up with gobbledygook, and he can't do it. And so what he's obviously trying to do is fly under the radar screen and appear as a moderate immigration control advocate. And then as soon as he gets the nomination, the real Rechtenwald is going to come out, and where he wants to seal the border, and he's going to be a Trumpista when it comes to immigration. But here, 5 minutes, it's like he was stammering. he couldn't. That was one of the fascinating parts of the thing. And in this like frustration that he has to do gobbledygook for 5 minutes, he actually says that his principal opponent on immigration, this just came out of the clear blue, said that he wants, and I assume he's got to be referring to me. He didn't use my name, but he's got to be referring to me. That I supposedly came out in favor of Social Security for immigrants or illegal immigrants. I mean, oh my gosh. I have been from the very beginning the one calling for the immediate repeal of Social Security. If you go back to the South Carolina debate, it was he who was saying, I'm with Jacob's opponents here on Social Security. I want the off-ramp. That's what they were calling it at the time, that we need a 25-year off-ramp. And he said, you can go back and watch it. It's on my campaign website at jacobforliberty.com, that he was with the people calling for the off-ramp. And, you know, the so-called anarchists favoring an off-ramp, 25-year off-ramp for this socialist program. And that was his position. And they were all attacking me for wanting to end Social Security back then. And so now, out of the clear blue, he says, oh, my principal opponent wants to give Social Security to... I don't want to give Social Security to anybody. I want to get this thing repealed. But it was his frustration that he had 5 minutes to do gobbledygook that caused him to come out of the clear blue with this weird, very, very weird allegation. So, all right, let's move to some other interesting aspects. Now, what I've been saying from the very beginning is that to lead America to freedom, which is our job in this party, we need to get our house in order here first. Okay, if we can restore the sound founding principles of this party, then now we're ready to lead America to freedom. So the question is, and this is my quest, to move the party back towards founding principles of liberty, free markets, and voluntary charity, and reject socialism in every way possible. In other words, open borders, the immediate repeal of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all welfare state programs, the separation of economy in the state, money in the state, education in the state, healthcare in the state. In other words, a pure message of liberty that I contend will vault us into the 10 to 15% category, double what I got 20 years ago. We made a lot of progress in 20 years. Now, so far, in South Carolina, there have been two of us, Josh Smith and me, that immediate repeal of Social Security and Medicare. Okay, all the rest, no, we need an off-ramp, 25 years, contract, gave them our word, and all this other stuff, when it's just a straight socialist welfare state program. It always has been from the very beginning. No different from food stamps or public housing or any other welfare state program. And it conveys a lack of faith and freedom. You see, I have no doubts that if these socialist programs would be repealed today, everybody would be fine. See, but we need to restore our faith and freedom. America lived without these socialist programs for more than 100 years. Nobody was dying in the streets. But in South Carolina, they were all saying, no, Jacob, you're wrong. You're wrong. And I mean, and you can see, you know, how vociferous they were on this thing. You know, Chase was there saying, by golly, not only in that debate, but subsequent debates, we have to continue this thing, you know, in his passionate voice. We have to we owe it to the generation to continue, and so forth. All right. Here's one of the fascinating things. At the Colorado debate, Mike Tremont is talking and says, Social Security is evil. Now, this is a point he has said for many, many debates now. Social Security is evil. But at the South Carolina debate and subsequent debates, he's taken the position, but we have to continue it because there's a contract, we owe it to people, and, you know, the standard stuff on this socialism. But I told my campaign manager 3 weeks ago, I said, Mike Tremont is going to come join us on this. I guarantee you. Why? Because it's going to hit him. That how can you ever call for the continuation of something that you believe is evil? It doesn't fit. I mean, you know, the Libertarian Party presidential candidate is going to say, well, Social Security is evil, but we got to continue evil. I mean, that is not a real popular message when you're calling for the continuation of something that you consider evil. And I knew that was going to finally hit Mike, and it ultimately did, because in the South Carolina debate, he said, we need to end Social Security now. And when that word now came out, I knew that he had seen the light on this thing. That is a major shift toward principle, because Mike, you know, has a lot of supporters in this party. And so his supporters are now going to know that. They're going to say, oh my gosh, he's now in the camp of being, taking this principled position. And I'm sure he would take the same position, I'm not positive, but on Medicare and Medicaid as well. But if he takes it on the crown jewel, Social Security, everything now falls into place. And I'm confident that he would say the same thing on Medicare and Medicaid. But major shift toward principle. I mean, this is what I'm yearning for, because now all his supporters are likely to shift also, because they're going to start thinking about it. My gosh, why is Mike changing his position? They're going to figure it out. Okay, all right, so the others are still, there. I mean, Chase is still a vociferous advocate. But what's interesting is that in every debate, past 4 or 5 debates, Chase has not come out with his passionate, excited, vociferous defense of Social Security like he did in South Carolina in a subsequent debate. He's become very passive about it. In the debate we had in Oklahoma, and I brought this up on Social Security, he just said, oh, I want to end Social Security too. Very, very passive approach. He's like, before it was, we have to continue this, and it's so important, and contract, and people will be dying in the streets. He's become extremely passive on this issue. And so have the other candidates. Now, I'm not saying that they're in our camp yet, but the fact that they have shifted to passivity indicates that they might be sensing a shift in the party. Because otherwise they would stick with their vociferous defense of the socialist program. So the others are still there, but they don't consider it evil. I mean, they consider this a good government program, that takes money from one group of people and gives it to another group of people. And, let me point out, there is no care or compassion with this program. I mean, libertarians that say, oh, Jacob, you lack care and compassion. No, there's no care or compassion with a program that relies on the initiation of force. All right, so another big thing that happened today, fascinating thing, is that Chase is talking about education. Now, Chase has been one of the premier advocates of school choice in our party. School vouchers, educational choice, get libertarians elected to the school boards. I mean, a big school choice advocate. Suddenly in this debate, Chase says that he favors the separation of school and state. Wow. This is an incredible shift. Incredible shift. The separation of school and state means get government entirely out of education. This is what I've been arguing for 30 years, but during this entire campaign, that we can't be advocating vouchers. That's a Republican position. We can't be trying to take over the public schools and think that we're going to run this socialist institution. We have to lead America to freedom, which means making the case for educational liberty, not for reform and not for school vouchers, which violate our principles. And here is Chase saying he now favors the separation. There is a shift taking place here. And clearly he senses that shift taking place here, to be shifting also. This is very exciting for me. Finally, Lars. Okay, Lars, great guy. And Lars, in the first 3 debates or so, one of his principal positions, centerpiece, was to replace the income tax with a national sales tax of some 18 to 23%. And he was citing fairtax.org and telling people, go to fairtax.org, and this is a fantastic proposal and the American people will love it and everything. Well, of course, I hammered him in these debates, saying, my gosh, so you're shifting the weight of the welfare warfare state onto the poor. This is a regressive tax. So the rich will love it, but the rich are going to vote for Trump and Biden anyway. They're not going to vote for a Libertarian Party candidate. And this will cost us the vote of every single poor person in this country, or every single person who's having trouble making ends meet. Because they're going to see what we're doing. We're trying to protect the rich by saddling the sales tax on them, and a regressive tax. And why so high? I mean, America lived without an income tax or a sales tax for more than 100 years because they didn't have socialism, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So the expenses were minuscule. But Lars has to make it 18% because he supports Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, and these massive welfare state programs. So he has to make it like revenue neutral. The same amount of money that the income tax collects will be collected by the sales tax. Well, you're still going to have a very intrusive IRS that's going to be going after people for sales tax violations. You know that. But what's fascinating, in the last 4 or 5 debates, Lars has not brought up this proposal at all. Not once has he brought it. This was the centerpiece of his campaign, because this is the power of argumentation and debate. He realizes it's a weak position. It's a bad position to be calling for a sales tax. Now, he explains this and says, when I bring it up, he hasn't renounced it, because sometimes I'll bring it up and he'll still defend it and say, well, we have to deal with the real world. We're not talking about an idealistic, libertarian, utopian stuff. And, well, yeah, the real world is we don't need an income tax and we don't need a sales tax. My opinion is you don't need any tax. Government can be funded voluntarily. But the founders at least had the second best position, and that's just excise taxes and tariffs. I'd never justify them, but you don't need a big national sales tax. That's real. That's the reality. But if you support these massive socialist programs like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, which Lars still does, unfortunately, you need that massive sales tax. But the fact that he's become passive on this issue indicates there's another shift that he perceives. There's a shift in this party toward principle. And this is why this debate, for me, was the most fascinating debate of all. Because what I want to do is I want this party to restore its sound founding principles, okay? And then once we do that, we run a presidential campaign with those principles. They are our greatest asset. And we target different groups of people. We don't target Republicans. We target different groups of people, migrant families across America with our open borders position, blacks who have suffered the oppression of this drug war, this evil program that really is the most racist government program since segregation. 50% of people who don't vote, that's a gold mine for us, okay? Because if they see that we're not trying to reform or fix this system, that we want to dismantle this system, they will go and register and vote. Those are my voters. Those are my 3 groups of voters. The migrant families across America, millions, American blacks, that I think will come with us when they see where we stand on this vicious, evil drug war. The lower classes that are getting squeezed by inflation, that live paycheck to paycheck, when they see that we stand for sound money, the separation of money in the state, they will come with us. And then the 50% of people who don't vote, there's your 10 to 50% right there. That's my post-debate report. Thank you for tuning in this long. I'm Jacob Hornberger, Libertarian candidate for president. You guys have a very happy Easter. My campaign website is jacobforliberty.com.